Hello students! This is Module 1, Lesson 3 of your Professional Diploma in Graphic Design. I want to welcome you all from me, Anne-Marie du Plessis, as well as Shaw Academy, and I hope you're all excited to dig deeper into the field of graphic design. Before we start our fun fact, I would like to remind you on the exercise we did at the end of Lesson 2. Remember, we needed to come up with a logo concept for our friend Fred's Coffee Shop. On another note, I would like to share an interesting design fact with you. Coca-Cola got its name from the flavoring of cocaine leaves and cola fruits. But unlike most startup companies, where the inception begins with the company name followed by the logo, Coca-Cola partners John Pemberton and Frank Robinson decided that two C's would look better than a C and a K in designs, so they decided on the name Coca-Cola. The name was originally done by hand in script, which has since been converted into a typeface called Spencerian script. In case you forgot, my name is Anne-Marie du Plessis. Yes, it is indeed a silent S at the end of my surname. And today I would like to leave you with a quote by famous graphic designer Paul Rand. The designer does not begin with some preconceived idea. Rather, the idea is the result of careful study and observation, and the design a product of that idea. What I would like you to take away from this fact is that any and all ideas and concepts have been inspired by something else. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to come up with an idea from nothing. It's simply not going to happen. And if you stick around for our later modules, I will get into the process of creative thinking that might just be what you need to help you think outside of the box. Or rather, who said that there should be a box? I'm sure by now you know exactly how to access our courses. Remember that you can access our lessons either via our app or via our website, whichever is most convenient for you. If you have missed any lessons, you can watch the recording to easily catch up. When watching the recordings, remember that you can start and stop the recording and go back to view any material that you would like to recap. Did you know that you can unlock your toolkit at a minimal cost? It contains some amazing content that will enhance your learning experience. If you are looking for it, it is located under the Resources tab and includes informative content such as summary notes, webinar slides, and really insightful bonus lessons. A friendly reminder to remember to attend all your lessons. Discipline is one of the most important characteristics when it comes to work ethics. Have you downloaded your free 7-day trial of Adobe Illustrator? If not, don't forget to do it after the lesson. Once the app is downloaded, you have the option to extend your trial and get an additional 15% off. This special is only valid for students doing the Professional Diploma in Graphic Design at Shaw Academy, so don't miss out on this awesome deal. Have you been interacting with Morpheus? Remember, he gets even more clever when you rate his responses, so do interact with him. You can also ask your classmates, so please make sure to use this feature as well. If you have any other queries, please send me an email at support@shawacademy.com and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Before we start with Lesson 3, I would like to answer a question a lot of students have. Which operating system is best for graphic design? My honest opinion, the one you have access to. Both Mac and Windows are powerful machines, and all Adobe programs you will learn in this course are compatible with both. Mac and Windows work almost exactly the same way, with only minor differences, which I will be sure to inform you of when doing demos. One thing is for sure, you need a computer in order to be a designer. Are you as excited as I am for Lesson 3? Today, we will look at the design cycle. We will look at effective logo designs, and I will also introduce the amazingly powerful Adobe Illustrator to you. So what exactly is a logo? We can define it as a graphical symbol that identifies a company's products, services, and values. A logo's core idea is to convey what a company stands for as simplistic as possible. Logos originate from the pictographs our ancestors made in the prehistoric times. We can also say that our signature is our own personal logo. We have a variety of logos, and to create a logo, you simply apply the elements and principles we learned in Lesson 2. The types of logos are a symbol, also known as an icon. These logos consist purely out of an icon that resembles the company or brand. Examples include the Nike logo, Apple, Shell, and Mercedes-Benz. We also get a word mark, which is simply the company name. Word marks are quite difficult in that they must be unique. You can't just use any font on your computer and type a business name. A truly successful wordmark is always unique. Familiar wordmarks include the Google logo, Disney and Coca-Cola, which were converted into typefaces afterwards, Facebook, as well as Nestle. A lettermark is similar to a wordmark in that it consists out of type, but usually the initials of a company. Lettermarks are useful for companies with difficult or long names, or that might be pronounced wrong. Think about the HP logo. Do you know what HP stands for? This brings me to a Q&A. What do the HP initials actually stand for? Is it Hewitt Phillips, which is a combination of two surnames, Hungary Putnok, which is a town in Hungary, Hewlett Packard, which is another combination of two surnames, or Hypertext Protocol, which are technological terms? If you guessed Hewlett Packard, you are correct. These are actually the two surnames of the inventors of HP. Continuing to our next type of logos, we then get a combination mark, which is a combination of a word or letter mark as well as an icon. These include the Unilever logo, Adidas, Lacoste, Burger King, and BP. These logos are dual functional, meaning that you can use either the word or icon on its own and still be able to identify the brand. Our last type of logo is called an emblem. Emblems are the exception in that they contain a lot of detail. They normally have the company's name or initial in a detailed enclosure or shield. The norm usually is that a logo needs to be as simplistic as possible, but emblems mostly ignore this rule. But if applied successfully, they can be very unique and sophisticated. Examples are the Bentley logo, Harley Davidson, most universities and colleges' logos, as well as Porsche. Companies with symbols or icons can even change the appearance of the logo by adding texture and values to make it seem three-dimensional or slightly different without distorting the basic shape of the logo. Can you identify any of these symbol logos? Perhaps just name them to yourself as we move along. This is the Batman logo. We have the Instagram logo. We have the Shell logo. Mitsubishi, as well as the Pepsi logo. Wordmarks are typeface-based logos that spell out the name of a company. The use of a typeface is thus very important when it comes to wordmarks, as it not only needs to encapsulate the values of the company, but should also be unique. When creating a wordmark, designers tend to either come up with a new typeface or adjust an existing typeface to make it unique. Small elements can also be added to make the wordmark stand out and add symbolic meaning. I would like to show you a couple of famous wordmark logos. Again, you can simply mention them if you identify them. This would be a lot easier since the name is written out. This is the Coca-Cola logo. We have the FedEx logo, which we discussed in our previous lesson. The Canon logo. We have the Kellogg's logo, the Toys R Us logo, as well as the Visa logo. Similar to a wordmark, a lettermark consists out of type. It normally uses the company's initials or the brand's first letter. The reason for companies to use a lettermark is perhaps the fact that the company's initials or first letter might graphically depict well, or the name might be very long or difficult to pronounce. Famous lettermarks include H&M, Electronic Arts or EA, IBM. Do you know what IBM stands for? It stands for International Business Machines, and this logo was invented by Paul Rand, famous graphic designer we quoted in the beginning of this lesson. Coco Chanel, P&G or Procter & Gamble. Were you actually able to identify the full name of any of these lettermark logos? A combination mark normally combines an icon and wordmark or any other logo element and allows the company flexibility in the sense that they can either use the wordmark or icon. This is a versatile choice as you can use both the wordmark and icon or either, and both should be recognizable. The wordmark and icon can overlap or stand next to each other and thus allows for great versatility. Most logos I personally can think of consist of a combination mark. Which combination marks can you think of? Famous combination marks include Burger King, Amazon. By the way, do you actually know what the arrow at the bottom of the word indicates? It indicates two things. It will indicate a smile, and it also indicates the letter A to Z, meaning that Amazon tries and sell almost anything. We have the Doritos logo, as well as the Unilever logo, which we also discussed in our previous lesson. Then the Pizza Hut logo, as well as our very own Shaw Academy logo. Emblems are usually found in the form of a crest with a combination of letters or words and icons. Due to the fact that emblems consist out of so many elements, this type of logo must be researched even more when it comes to legibility, especially when viewed really small. Emblems, however, add a sense of quality, reliability, and longevity to a brand and are traditional in appearance. This type of logo is normally found in formal institutions or organizations like governmental institutions, schools, sports teams, and even vehicles. Famous emblems include the Porsche logo, Warner Brothers Pictures, Harley Davidson, the soccer team Manchester United, as well as the Bentley logo. Let's quickly recap on our logo exercise you received in Lesson 2. Pretending you have a friend named Fred who wants to open up a coffee shop. Fred obviously does not have the capital to pay for a professional designer with years of experience and ask you to help him out. In return, he will give you a voucher to spend at his coffee shop as soon as it opens. You agree to this because you simply love coffee, and at least you will be famous because your designs will be displayed for everyone to see. To top it off, you get exposure as well. This might even open doors for your design career. What is the first thing you think that Fred will need? Of course, a logo. Fred has not come up with a name yet and simply would like you to provide him with some logo ideas first. You can actually think of a couple of ideas and simply want to start creating. I would like you to write down words, draw concepts, and identify colors that come to mind when you think about a logo for Fred's coffee shop. Please don't be pedantic about your drawing or creative ability. This is not what the exercise is about. We simply want to generate ideas for now. With all this in mind, we will now look at what you created. But first, it's question time again. But for this question, there is no right or wrong. I simply want to know what type of logo you created for Fred's coffee shop, considering the type of logos we just looked at. I assume most of you have probably created a symbol since Fred has not provided us with a name yet. In an instance like this where the client hasn't provided you with a name yet, we can always use dummy text or placeholder text if you feel that you would like to use text. But in general, your client should provide you with anything and not expect you to come up with a name unless they pay you to do it. I would like you to go back to the concepts you created in the previous lesson for our friend Fred's coffee shop. I forgot to mention that one of my other skills that you are not aware of is that I'm a mind reader. You don't believe me? Well, I'll prove it to you. I would like you to look at the concepts and ideas you created for this coffee shop logo. Your initial thought for this logo was a cup of coffee, perhaps with some steam or aroma, or even some coffee beans, right? What about colors? I can bet you brown or perhaps cream, or even black or white was one of the colors you thought about. Maybe you had a combination of these colors. Why not combine these ideas? I mean, this is going to be a really cool looking logo, isn't it? It does the job in communicating its intent, just like we have learned, doesn't it? Is this coffee cup similar to what you had in mind? Or perhaps something in the line of coffee beans? How close was I in visualizing your logo? Did your logo contain any of these elements? The reason why I knew this is the fact that these are the first elements that most people will think of when they come up with a design for a coffee shop logo. I'm obviously not a mind reader. There is not necessarily anything wrong with a cup of coffee. It's just very generic and not unique. This is why the design cycle is so important. By the way, if you did come up with something else, good on you. Please tell me if you did into Morpheus's text box, and also maybe mention what type of idea you came up with. As an exercise after this lesson, I would like you to simply Google the wording coffee shop logo and see what pops up. This will prove my point to what I've just explained to you. Simply coming up with a great design concept doesn't just happen. Think about the Starbucks logo. It is a coffee company, right? Well, did you realize that their logo is of a mermaid? What does that have to do with coffee? This doesn't even make any sense. To truly understand the meaning behind the Starbucks logo, we need to dig into some history. This is where your research step comes in. Do you remember the design cycle we briefly discussed in lesson 2? We will discuss it in more detail today. The mermaid on Starbucks logo is actually a representation of a historic sea creature called a siren or mermaid. She is the epitome of seduction, and the founders wanted to proclaim that their coffee is seductive, or rather enticing. Starbucks originally opened its doors in Seattle in 1971, and due to Seattle's location and connection with seafaring, they decided to use a nautical figure and thus came across the siren. Having said all this, to be able to create a truly effective logo, or any design for that matter, you will need to have certain steps in place. These steps, like you know, are known as the design cycle or pipeline. We have briefly looked into the design cycle in lesson 2 and will do a proper evaluation of each step in today's lesson. The design cycle basically entails a list of steps to get a design from concept to presentation. Let's get right into the steps for the design cycle. They include briefing, research and brainstorming, thumbnails, production, as well as present. And we will look at these steps in more detail. Along the way, I'm also going to give you some great advice from a designer's perspective, so be sure to make notes. When it comes to the first step called briefing, resist the urge to just start designing before properly consulting your client. Yes, design is fun, but sometimes being overexcited will cost you a lot of unnecessary time and money. You won't jump into a pool before properly learning how to swim, so why do the same with design? Of course, starting out as a designer, you will need some experience first before you feel worthy of charging people. You might even consider doing things for free for family or friends. I would suggest to use your discretion, but still be really careful of doing things for free. At some stage, you will get individuals who would think you will always be there to help them out for free. You are probably also doing this graphic design course in order to gain skills so you can generate an income. You won't ask your dentist friend to give you a free checkup, so why design for free? You might consider a trade, like we did with Fred, but please be careful, as it is sometimes difficult for others to put value to your work. Alternatively, and this is a process I normally like to follow, is to show your friends or family members your normal prices and then tell them that you will give them discount. Doing it this way, your friends will still feel that they can tell you when they're not happy without feeling guilty, and they will also respect your business ethic. A client brief is a questionnaire you provide your clients with to consult their design wants and needs. You will, however, need to adapt it, depending on the design task at hand. The basic topics that need to be addressed are company background and objectives, the company needs with regards to designs, the company concepts or ideas they prefer, competitors, the target market, delivery date and time, as well as budget. Let's have a brief look into these topics that need to be addressed, starting with the company background. Start off by getting all the company details and make sure you know who you will need to correspond with. If you're working on branding for a company, which would most likely be the case, you will need to know who it is for. Get some information on what the company does, as well as its values and objectives. If it is an already existing company, you will most likely get some background on the internet, whether it be a website, social media platform, or even a directory. Next, you will need to determine the design requirements. What will the company need from you as a professional designer? This will also help you in determining your time frame at a later stage in the briefing process. To get some insight as to what the company prefers when it comes to designs, ask them what type of designs they like. In some instances, you will get that the company would tell you to use your creative insight. From a designer's perspective, I really prefer this and it not only shows that the client trusts you, but also gives you creative freedom. Either way, you will need to know how to handle the situation, whether they know what they want or leave it all up to you. The more you get to work with clients, the easier this process becomes. In the next question of the briefing step, you will need to determine who the company's competition is. You will need to steer clear of creating similar designs as your client's competition, because you want to stand out, of course. You will also need to determine your client's target market. Sometimes this question might have been answered in the objective phase already. If it is older people, then consider a more traditional design approach. Younger people, on the other hand, would be open to a more contemporary approach. The due date can be quite tricky, as it is also dependent on feedback from your client. Make sure that you state this in your briefing with your client. You are just as dependable on them as they are on you. If I can give you one tip from my experience, it would be to add a day or two to your due date. An example would be, let's say you're designing a logo for a company. Generally, it takes 2 or 3 days to come up with a clever logo concept. Instead of saying that it will take you 3 days, rather prepare your client to wait a week. The reason why I say this is the fact that life happens and that you are probably going to work on other design projects as well. If there are no external factors that influence your due date, then this is a bonus. Give the client's design in advance, as this will show that you value them and went over and above to accommodate them. Don't be scared to add more time to do an excellent job. People really don't mind if you take a day or two longer, unless they are in a hurry. If it does happen that the client is in a hurry, don't be scared of charging a rush fee on top of your normal fee. This is if you are capable of doing the job in such a short time. Everything comes at a price, so don't be scared thinking you will chase a potential client away. I can guarantee you that if they really were in a hurry, they will probably not have time to shop around between various designers. Normally, the client won't have a set budget, and you will need to provide them with a price. I would suggest to create a basic price list before meeting the client, as it makes things more official and people will not try and negotiate on your price as easily. I would now guess that your next question would be, but how much do I actually charge? Well, it obviously depends on your skill and experience, but I will give you a breakdown as to how I determine my price and worth. Considering all the expenses that you need to cover, ranging from monthly subscriptions for design programs to rent, internet, the list goes on. You need to make a living. A lot of designers and craftsmen tend to charge by the hour. I would have to disagree with this, as there are so many other factors to consider. I would personally rather charge a day rate, considering that most things takes approximately a day to make. If you have a project that takes you 2 days to make, well, then simply charge 2 days rate. Next, determine how much you feel you are worth. It would be wise to do some research, and the internet is a really handy tool to see what other designers charge in your area. Once you have established what you feel worth, be sure that it covers your expenses as well. The more experience you gain, the more you will ask. It's that easy. You should now know how much to charge for a project. These are the 7 main elements to consider when briefing your client, the first step of the design cycle. Moving on to our second option in the design cycle, we will now look at research and brainstorming. You will start off by doing some research on your client by using the information gathered in step 1, briefing. You will also look at various design concepts you might want to use as inspiration. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to come up with a brand new idea that has never been thought of, as it is virtually almost impossible. We will always be inspired by something. Just don't copy it verbatim and rather make it more personalized. Once you have gathered enough research and inspiration, you can start to conceptualize your ideas. I normally keep a small booklet at hand where I doodle all my creative ideas. Kind of the same way you did when coming up with Fred's coffee shop logo. Don't move over to the computer just yet, unless you are a digital doodler. I, however, find it easier to start on a piece of paper and just go wild. There is a difference between doodling and actual thumbnails. Doodling, as mentioned, falls under the brainstorming phase, and this is simply a phase where you can let your imagination be free. Thumbnails happen right after the doodling phase. This is a more refined way of compiling your ideas and coming up with a final hand-drawn concept before moving on to the digital phase. We finally reached the second last phase, and only now do you actually begin to work on your computer. This is when you take your thumbnail ideas and digitize them. Most often than not, you will even still have changes being applied to your designs, so don't sweat it. This is totally normal, and I often do this as well. We have now reached our last phase, called the present phase. This is when you are confident with your work and thus will now present it to your client. When presenting your artwork, try and make it as appealing as possible. We can do this by using mock-ups to showcase our artwork. We will get into this at a later stage, but basically a mock-up is a file you can either create yourself or download and present your artwork on it. It can be in the form of a business card or window branding. It helps your client to visualize the potential your concept has and can also help your work look a lot more professional than simply sending the artwork as is. Right after the presenting phase, be prepared to go back to research and brainstorming, as your client might want some changes made. This is a normal process for the design cycle to follow, and if you have a good understanding with your client, it should not happen too many times. This was a look into what it's like to consult and brief a client. Another tip I can give you is to meet your client at a place where you are comfortable. This will help you to feel more confident and at ease. You don't need a space or studio at home. You can simply meet them at your favorite coffee shop. Adobe Illustrator, as the name implies, is a digital illustration program mostly used for branding and typography. This is the program designers use to create logos, business cards, letterheads, brochures, posters, banners. The list goes on. We actually use Adobe Illustrator most of the times, so it is a good starting point for anyone wanting to become a graphic designer. I will familiarize you with Illustrator, so it might be a good idea to get a pen and paper ready now, as I will teach you some awesome shortcuts as well. The topics and ideas I will discuss in Illustrator today is how to create a new document. We will look at the interface introduction. We will look at the workspace. I will also introduce the toolbar to you and how to use the basic tools. This is what the Adobe Illustrator interface would look like once you've opened it up. It obviously also depends on the version you have available. I'm working in CC 2020 and this is what it looks like. As with most things in Adobe programs, there is more than one way to do something, like to open a file or to create a new document. We are going to start off by creating a new document because for this exercise, I would like to recreate Fred's logo. I can simply go to File and click on New, or press Ctrl N if you're using a Windows computer, or Command N if you're using a Mac. Alternatively, I can simply click on Create New here. It will open up a new document dialog box. On the left here, I have different file sizes. I'm not going to worry too much about that now. And on the top, I have different types of documents. What is the reason for you creating a specific document? If you're not 100% sure, I personally prefer to use a print A4 document. You can always change it later. The reason for this is because Adobe Illustrator, remember in lesson 1 we said Adobe Illustrator is a vector-based program. This means that we create vector images. What makes a vector image so amazing is that it doesn't ever pixelate. And you know pixelation is when the image loses quality, you start to see these small square blocks. So this is a really cool function or feature of a vector image. It never loses quality. So the size of the document in this case doesn't really matter. So I've clicked on print, I've selected A4 here, and on the right hand side it will change my settings to an A4 document. My width and height, I don't prefer to work in points, I would rather change it to millimeters. So we have the document width and the height here. We have the orientation. Do I want it portrait or landscape format? The choice is yours. Artboard refers to the amount of pages we would like to add. You can add here by pressing the up and down arrows, or you can add it at a later stage. Don't worry too much about the bleed function now, as this is a term that we will make use of later. Once you're happy, you can simply click on Create. You will see that we created a new Adobe Illustrator artboard. The first thing that I would like you to do is to make sure that we have the same workspace. Because if we don't, I might click on tools that might not be activated on your workspace and you will get lost. First off, we go to Window at the top, click on Workspace, and simply select Essentials Classic. If you use an older version of Adobe Illustrator, Essentials Classic might not be there, so then you can simply click on Essentials. It's the same thing. Please note that the older versions of Illustrator might also not have this property feature here. But don't worry, because everything that you do on the properties feature here, you will be able to change at the property feature at the top. So these are basically the same things. On the left hand side, we have the Tools panel. This is where all your tools are that helps you to create elements. And like I mentioned, on the right hand side, we have the Properties panel, which you can minimize by pressing the 2 arrows here. You can activate it again by pressing this cube icon. If you hover over it, it will say Properties. Minimize, or you can just click it again with some other property and features that you can change. I've already created Fred's logo just to show you what we are aiming at. I'm going to minimize, and you'll see I have a Fred's Coffee Shop icon on my desktop. I'm going to open that up. You'll see I've got 2 folders or 2 icons on here. The left is my ideas folder. So I have a variety of ideas that inspired me to create Fred's logo. And on the right, I have the Illustrator file of the originally designed Fred's Coffee Shop logo. You can see I've got all my inspiration on the right hand side on the outside of the artboard. Fred asked me to recreate him a logo. He was clueless and he didn't know what to name his coffee shop. So I didn't have time to waste. I told him, Fred, let's call it Fred's Coffee Shop, and he was happy with that. And I had to go do some research and dig a little deeper to find out what Fred means. Fred's full name is Frederick, and doing research, you can see that Fred refers to peaceful ruler. That is what the word or the name Frederick means. When I think about the word peaceful, what comes to mind? If I can think about an icon or anything visual, these were the terms that came to mind, and the same with ruler, these were the icons that came to mind. To zoom in and out on Illustrator, you can simply hold in Alt on your keyboard and scroll with your mouse cursor up and down to zoom in and out. To move around, you can hold spacebar and simply click and drag to move around on your artboard. That's how I do it quickly. At the top here, you'll see that I have my Fred Coffee Adobe Illustrator file, and on the left I have Untitled 1, which was our newly created Illustrator document. So I can switch between documents by simply pressing these 2 tabs. I'm going to copy Fred's logo just to have reference on working on. So to do this, you can select it, you can go to Edit, Copy, or you can press Ctrl-C on a Windows computer or Command-C on a Mac. I'm going to move over to my newly created artboard and simply press Ctrl-V for paste. I know that doesn't make sense, just bear with me. Alternatively, you can go to Edit and click Paste. Mac, it would be Command-Paste. Command-V, apologies. So this is my logo for my original logo that I created for Fred. I'm simply going to move it off the artboard because we want to recreate this. I'm going to start with the crown. That's the most difficult part. Fred's Coffee was simply a typeface that I downloaded that had quite unique features in terms of it doesn't look like a default typeface you get on your computer. Remember that we don't want that. So to do the crown, I'm going to zoom in a bit, spacebar to move around. I recreated the crown. I referred to basic shapes of the crown, so I simply went over to my toolbar panel on the left and I located the rectangle tool. You'll see it's the square tool here. You can simply click on it once, move over to your artboard and click and drag to create a rectangle. You'll see some blue squares and circles around your rectangle. This is because it indicates these anchors or these squares are the anchor points for our rectangle, and it's an indication that we have this rectangle selected. To deselect it, we can simply go over to the black arrow, which is the selection tool, click on it once, and click anywhere outside of your shape. It would simply deselect it, and this is what our shape originally now looks like. I can then select my shape again by clicking on it once. Next to the black arrow, I have a white arrow which indicates the direct selection tool. I can simply click on this and double click on any anchor points which I have at the 4 corners of my square or my rectangle. click and drag, and I can change the shape of my rectangle. At the moment I don't want to do this, but this tool will come in handy in a short while, so bear with me. I would like to, if you can visualize the outside of the crown, it kind of looks like a basic house shape. Does that make sense? Okay, we've got the top part of the house here, the roof, and then the bottom part here. I'm going to move over to a tool called the pen tool. By the way, if you would like, I would recommend, if you are really interested in Illustrator, which is one of the programs that you use most as a graphic designer, I would recommend you do our Adobe Illustrator course, as we work in Illustrator in depth here. And you're also going to learn the pen tool. The pen tool is quite complex to get around, but once you learn it, you can never unlearn it. It's similar to riding a bicycle or learning how to swim. If someone taught you how to swim, you remember the first day that you learned to swim, it was really difficult and it was really nerve-wracking. Well, the pen tool is exactly like this. It's going to be really frustrating and difficult to work with in the beginning, but as soon as you learn it, this is probably the tool that you're going to use the most. We're not going to use the pen tool today, but if you look at the pen tool, you'll see there's a small triangle at the bottom right here. This means we have additional tools under the pen tool. So simply clicking and holding on the pen tool, I'll activate these other tools. At the moment, I want to add another anchor point. I'm going to click on my top horizontal bar in the middle. It will even indicate when it's in the middle. Click once. Now I can expand the shape to form the shape of this imaginary house that we're referring to by simply going back to the direct selection tool. I'm going to click my direct selection tool, double click the center anchor point I just created and slightly move it up. You can hold in Shift to retain its position. See, if I hold in Shift, it stays in the center, something like that. Once you're happy, you can just deselect it by clicking outside of your shape. Just view it, perfect. Next, I would like to add the two circles in the crown. I can go over to my rectangle tool that we used to create the crown's basic shape in the beginning. Remember, it's got the triangle at the bottom right here. So if I click and hold, I will get additional tools that I can make use of. I'm going to click on the ellipse tool. When I click and drag, you will see that it will start to form a circle or an ellipse. To create a perfect circle, I need to hold down Shift. You will see that it retains its perfect circle shape. Once I'm happy, I'm going to move over to the selection tool again and click and move my circle to its desired position. At the moment, I think my circle is slightly big, so to resize, I'm simply going to hover over one of its corners, drag to make it smaller. Remember, holding in Shift, otherwise I'm going to lose its proportions. And once I'm happy, release the mouse key and then release Shift afterwards. Very important, otherwise it's going to distort. Maybe slightly smaller. What do you think? Yes, like that. I'm going to copy this. You remember how to copy? Control C, Control V. Move it over. Make sure that they're symmetrical. That looks perfect. Yes. Next, I need to add this gap here. So if you use your imagination again, you can see a triangle in here. So I'm simply going to create a triangle. Where would I get the triangle? Go over to my ellipse tool again, and you'll see, but there's no triangle. How am I going to create a triangle? By simply using the polygon tool. So I'm going to select the polygon tool, and if I click and drag, you'll see that it creates a hexagon. If you click up and down, or if you click the up and down arrows on your keyboard, you will see that it will add more sides. And if you press down, it will deduct sides until you find a triangle. Really cool and easy and quick way to do that. Make my triangle. Once I'm happy, I'm going to move over to my selection tool and move this to where I want it to be. Remember, if you move something around, you need to select the selection tool. Otherwise, you will just create another triangle, which we don't want at the moment. I'm going to move over to the corner here and simply rotate my triangle. You can even move your shape by pressing the up and down, left and right arrows on your keyboard. Perfect. I can simply duplicate this. Remember, Control C, Control V. Move it over. But now, how do I rotate it? I can either use the rotation tool, but I want it to be rotated as the exact same angle as this triangle. So I'm going to simply right click it, go to transform, select reflect because I want a mirrored reflection of the other triangle. Make sure that it's set to vertical because I want to reflect it vertically, and click OK. I simply now need to make sure that it's placed on the correct area. Once I'm happy with the shapes I created, you can see that my crown is taking shape, but it's still not what I want. So I'm going to use another cool tool that you will be amazed as to what it can do. Making sure that you select your whole shape by selecting the selection tool and holding in your mouse, I'm going to move over to this shape, which is referred to as the shape builder tool. Click on it once. I can simply, if you see, as soon as I hover over an element, it will change to like a grayscale. That means I'm going to select this part. I want to merge my triangle and circle. So by simply clicking and holding on my circle, moving over to my triangle, I've merged that shape. The same with the circle and triangle on the right hand side. Now I can simply use my selection tool, deselect my shape, and select this triangle, circle, merge, and simply press delete or backspace on your keyboard to get rid of it. Same with that one, backspace, got rid of it. I still don't have this perfect shape of my crown because I want to get rid of these two anchor points. How am I going to do that? By simply deducting or removing these two anchor points. Remember, we added an anchor point in the beginning, so why not have a feature that can remove anchor points? I'm going to move over to my add anchor point tool here, click and hold, and select delete anchor point. Hover over this anchor point, click once until it's deleted. And now you'll see we have the outline of our crown, which is really cool. The next step is to create the two horizontal lines at the bottom. So what type of tool am I going to use to create this? The line segment tool, of course, easy enough. You'll see it's here next to the type tool, and you can simply click it. Click and drag from left to right or right to left, whichever way is more comfortable for you, and make sure to hold in shift so that it retains its angle. And release until you see this purple line, which indicates that it's parallel and up to the border of the crown. I can copy this now by selecting the tool or selecting the line and press Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V. Move it to where I want it to be. I would now like to go back, select my crown, and change the color of my crown. So guess where I'm going to do this? I can either go to the left here on this panel or at the top, whichever way suits you best. Remember, my fill currently is white. We can't see it because the artboard is also white. But if I double click this, I will get this plethora of colors that I can choose from. In the middle, I will have a rainbow of colors, so I can choose the type of color that I want. And then I can choose the hue or the saturation that I would like to change here. Maybe a bit more orange, like this. I would like a mustardy gold color. I think that's fine. Maybe a bit more orange. Yes, perfect. Like that. Once you're happy, simply click OK, and it would change the fill of your crown. But I still have the stroke. So how do I get rid of the stroke? Well, make sure that you've got your icon or your shape selected, and you can click on your stroke here at the bottom. Make sure that it overlaps your fill here, and simply click on none. If it's a white square with a red diagonal line, it means none. You see that my stroke disappeared. To change my two horizontal strokes at the bottom, I need to select them with my selection tool. I can now, to make sure that I have the same color as my crown, go over to my eyedropper tool, which is on the keyboard, or this eyedropper icon, and simply click on my crown to make sure that it takes the properties of my crown. You'll see that my two horizontal strokes disappeared. This is because my crown is a fill, but my two horizontal strokes are strokes, which at the moment you'll see that it means I don't have strokes. If you zoom in, you'll see I don't have any strokes. I can simply click on this curved arrow here. If you hover over it, it will say swap fill and stroke. So doing this, you'll see that I all of a sudden have my strokes. The problem I have now is that my strokes aren't thick enough. So I can go to the top or to the right at your properties panel, whichever is more convenient for you, and simply adjust my stroke width by making it thicker. Something like that. Perfect. And that's about it. What do you think? The other problem I have now is that these are 3 separate elements, but I want to group them. To undo, you can simply press Ctrl Z or Command Z on a Mac. I need to select them all with my selection tool and press Ctrl G for group or Command G. Alternatively, you can simply right click and say group. At the moment it says ungroup because I've already grouped these elements together. So now when I move this around, you'll see that they all move around at the same time. Next, I'm going to try and recreate Fred's coffee, the type. So what tool do you think I'm going to use here? I will use my type tool. Select your type tool and click once. I'm simply going to type Fred in caps, Fred's. Go over to my selection tool to deselect my type and then select my type tool again. Click on anywhere on the artboard, type coffee. I'm going to resize Fred by simply moving over to a corner, dragging the corner. Why is this happening? Because I'm not holding in Shift and resizing it. So to change this typeface, I need to identify this. So double click to have it activated because I actually grouped it. I can see that the character states its acumen variable concept and that my font is extra condensed bold. So that's the typeface I'm going to use. I have my typeface now selected, and on my properties panel here, I'm going to look for this typeface, acumen variable concept, and it was extra condensed bold. How do I add the spacing in between my letters? I'm not going to use spacebar, okay? We don't do that. In Illustrator, we have specific tools, and on your character panel here on the right, you'll see a tool called the tracking option. I can simply adjust my tracking by typing in a digit here, or I can click on the drop-down arrow and select whichever option I think is going to work. In this case, I think 100's perfect. And as easy as that. To change coffee, I can either do the same steps as I did with Fred, or I can simply use the eyedropper tool and click on Fred. It will take all of Fred's characteristics and change coffee to that. Obviously, coffee is going to be a bit smaller, so I'm taking my selection tool and simply dragging by holding in Shift to make coffee slightly smaller. Oh, that's about right. To change Fred's color, I'm going to select it. Go over to my color palette here at the top and choose a very dark, I think the color I chose there was 90% black, this one. The same with coffee. Select coffee, go to your color palette here and select 90% black. Now I can simply take my crown, move it over, resize it by holding in Shift, remember, very important. Oops, undo, Ctrl Z. Zoom in a bit more, maybe make it slightly bigger and rotate it. So you can hover over the corner. If it makes the curved arrows, I can rotate it. Now you'll see that my crown is behind Fred. That's the reason for this is because I created my crown first. To get it on top, you have your crown selected, right click and say arrange, bring to front. Now it's easier to move. And about there. I can simply select everything now and make sure that it fits on my whole artboard. Remember, holding in Shift. I can't stress this enough, you guys. Shift is so important. And that's it. Now, how do I save this? Because Fred wants to view this, but Fred doesn't have Illustrator on his computer, so he won't be able to access this file. You can go to File, Save As, type your name. Make sure that it's an Illustrator file. The reason we save it in an Illustrator file is because you can always go back and make changes to it, and simply click on Save. It will give you a dialog pop-up box that just indicates to you the type of file. If it takes you more than 3 seconds to read, simply say OK. No, not really. But at the moment it's not really important. For Fred to view it, we need to save it in a readable format. So a JPEG is normally a really good format. We can simply go to File, Export, Export As, locate the folder where we would like to save it. At the moment it's already set on JPEG. Don't worry about the other formats. We keep it at JPEG. The one important thing is that you need to tick Use Artboards. If we don't, it's going to save the logo on the outside of the artboard here as well, which we don't want. And you can simply click Export. Again, a dialog box. Takes more than 3 seconds to read. Just say OK. And now I'm done. So if I go to my folder, you will see the JPEG image here. I can open it up and we can view it. And I also have my Illustrator file here. This is what the end result looks like. As you can identify, we have a combination mark here, where either the name can be used or simply the F with the crown, which identifies as a letter mark. It's really simple, but the concept of a logo is to be really simple. And considering what we have learned in Illustrator in only one lesson, I think this is a really good attempt. What I would like you to do is to come up with your very own coffee shop logo. I know we have done this before, but the reason why I say this is that I want you to compare your first logo with the second logo and determine how much you have learned in just one lesson. So I would like you to utilize the skills you learned in Illustrator so far to create yet your own coffee shop logo. You don't need to make use of the name Fred and can use any name you want to. If you get stuck on the name part, you can simply use your own name and see how you can use that creatively. Please share your logo on social media by using the hashtag #SureLogoDesign. You can perhaps download the 7-day trial for Adobe Illustrator now, as we will work on Illustrator in the next lesson as well. Practice makes perfect, so please utilize any free time you have in order to learn Illustrator. For our next lesson, we will put into practice what we have learned so far. I will show you how to create a pamphlet using our newly created logo. We will obviously be applying the elements and principles of design. Just to summarize what we did today, we identified the different types of logos and evaluated our logos created for Fred's Coffee Shop. We realized that most people will come up with a very similar design, and that's why proper research and planning is so important. We looked at the design of the Starbucks logo and its origin to prove the fact that a logo should be unique, and thus the design cycle is of crucial importance to get proper background on your client. We then ended off with the design cycle, also known as the design pipeline. These steps include briefing, research and brainstorming, thumbnails, production, and finally present. Congratulations and well done on completing your third lesson for Module 1. Remember to send your feedback or suggestions to support@shoreacademy.com. I hope you're all excited for our next lesson and that you will practice what you have learned about Adobe Illustrator today. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're almost halfway through Module 1. I'll see you next time.